Hey there, it's JohnBurry555, and welcome to my full and complete review of Star Wars The Mandalorian Season 3. Timestamps for each episode will be down below, but some initial beginning thoughts I would like to set up for my review is each individual episode was good in my opinion. They all had, of course, the strengths and weaknesses, but I thought in most episodes, in fact all of them, the strengths outweighed the weaknesses. However, the one issue with the season is taken all together with the story they want to tell, felt like they were missing the mark. Not like they did a bad job, but more like something was missing. I'm not sure how I can articulate it, but just something felt off. Something was missing. Perhaps maybe because the story being told would have made more sense like if it was a history documentary rather than a character-based story. Maybe. It's hard to say, but maybe that's what I'm getting at. I feel like we were more getting the story of a people, not the story of a few characters. Maybe that's it, because like the overarching story was not connected to the character story. Maybe, again, it's very hard to put it into words what I feel like the season was lacking. But you know what? Let's put that aside for now and talk about each individual episode, beginning with episode 1. Welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 17. So in this episode, well, it's the beginning of Season 3 of The Mandalorian, and I have to say, probably the weakest of the premiere episodes of the 3 Mandalorian seasons so far. So, I mean, there's only 3 options to choose from. It's not like, what is it, 7 seasons for Star Wars The Clone Wars, so it has a lot more to live up to, especially because the other 2 season episode openers have very strong openings. Not all of them can be as strong, but you know what? Despite that, this still was a very solid opening. It set up what was going on, it recapped what occurred before. Just kind of wish one thing they did in recapping that they didn't quite do, but I can understand why they did it that way, but just wish they had done that one recap. I'll expand on that in my full review, but other than that, I did think this was a pretty decent episode. And welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 17, The Apostate. So where should I begin? Because there's a lot that does go on in this episode, but this is, well, for lack of a better term, a return to The Mandalorian after so long away. Sure, we got a little bit with The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, and actually, the Book of Boba Fett is what makes the weakest part of this episode. Because the episode begins with a recap of seasons 1 and 2, but they don't recap how Grogu got back with Din. Nothing about that. I wish they did. That's the one major complaint I have with this episode, that they don't address how Grogu and Din reunited. Didn't have to be much. A line here or something to recap. That would have been good, but that unfortunately was not addressed. Well, actually it was, but barely. Basically Din says to the armor that he completed actually it might have been to Griff Karga. One of them, he said that he completed his request and the child came back to him, something like that. But that's not much. It's limited. They could have done much more. Something along the lines, met up, found a Jedi, and Grogu decided he wants to be with me rather than train with a Jedi. Something like that would have been better, I think. That would have kind of explained it, but really, probably the weakest part of this episode is because of the Book of Boba Fett, which I didn't think was as bad as most people think, but I do agree that it was weak. But yeah, the Book of Boba Fett is what makes the weakest part of the episode, but the strengths of this episode far outshine that weakness. Like, we get confirmation that Din is he's more comfortable with droids than he used to be, but like the only droid he still truly trusts is the reprogrammed IG-86. I think I have his number right. That's reconfirmed to us. But what's actually probably one of the most interesting scenes, there's actually 2 of them, and both of them involve other Mandalorians besides Din. The first one has to do with the cult that he's a part of, still kind of unsure, but they're inducting another young child into the ranks, and the monster attacks during that, and Din's not there because, he's doing his own thing now, pretty much. But he comes, and he helps them stop the creature using his N1 Starfighter. But even though he helped them, helped save their lives, the almost still pretty much gave him the cold shoulder because he once took his helmet off. Also, that way he could look, so that way his adopted son could see him with his own eyes. The Almo really doesn't care about that. Um, at first, I saw this was actually a flashback sequence. It wasn't, but probably Dim went to a very similar ceremony when he first put his own helmet on. But so that but it does show that the children of the watch are still so set in their ways. Meanwhile, this contrasts with what we see with bo-katan. And there's a lot of things there because bo-katan's the one who told Din that don't believe all the rumors he heard about the planet Mandalore to be true. And here and the almost still is like, yeah, the planet's cursed, glassed, no chance. And like a piece of evidence that shows that people can get on the planet that Din found, it's just hand waved away how he found it trader, I believe what it was. And the almost takes that as evidence that Mandalore is inhospitable. But at the end of the episode, when Din meets up with bo-katan again on her house's homeworld, fortress world, ancestral home, some whatever, another planet in Mandalorian space, and she's defeated. Not military defeated, but emotionally defeated. She's pretty much, I would say this, she's in depression. I'm no psychologist or that kind of stuff, a psychiatrist, but she appears depressed. She returned without the Darksaber, and sounds like most of the Mandalorians that used to have allegiance to her abandoned her and now are just being mercenaries. Going back to the old ways, if you will. And I wonder if some of it she's maybe reflecting back on how the old ways keep on driving Mandalorians apart from each other, and was thinking how maybe because at one time she was fighting against a new way for Mandalore herself. You wonder if she's doing some reflection, but you can tell she is depressed and she blames it all because she didn't have the Darksaber. Well, having the Darksaber obviously is now what makes a leader. But perhaps that's why then with the Darksaber will make a good leader, because he doesn't see the Darksaber really as a symbol of power the way bo-katan and many other Mandalorians have. But it's kind of interesting how even though bo-katan, she rejects the myths around around the helmets and all that. Like she doesn't like she's a part of the group that leaving helmets on off doesn't really matter. Meanwhile, she's still all obsessed with the lore on the Darksaber and reveals it and sees that's the reason why she's failed as a leader, perhaps not realizing maybe there's some other things going on, like maybe she doesn't feel she deserves it herself internally. Meanwhile, the children that watch, like, oh, like the Darksaber they reveal, but they also, the helmets, like, oh, can't take helmets off. And actually, this all connects nicely in how the episode's title, The Apostate. An apostate is somebody who basically renounces or rejects a religious cult or the religion that they grew up in. Though not totally. I think what we're going to be seeing in Din's case is he thinks he's an apostate because he took his helmet off. No. I think if anything, we're going to see he's going to be an apostate, not because of that, but because he's going to realize how the rules that the Children of the Watch, the creed that the Children of the Watch specifically follow, is not the way forward for Mandalore and for the Mandalorian. That there's a better path forward that still honors the roots and the beliefs, but does not. What I think the word I'm looking for is that does not limit them. That does not, put artificial limitations on who's a Mandalorian. Like think of this. Like if somebody knocked Din's helmet off, that would apparently make him an apostate. It's worse that he voluntarily did it. It's literally the Almo in this episode describes it as worse. Not that it would have been okay if somebody else did it for him, but it's worse that he did it. So that's interesting. It's so dogmatic that accidents are not allowed to happen, apparently. It makes me wonder, what if somebody's helmet got knocked off during that battle with that creature early on? How would she respond? Probably she would have shunned them as well, the same way she's effectively shunning Din. Kind of showing how dogmatic lots of Mandalorians have become in different ways. So who knows how that's going to turn out, but maybe, hopefully, the Mandalorians will all find a way that's not so stuck up in the past. Perhaps. But really, we gotta talk about everything going on in Navarro, how it's much more prosperous than it used to be, because didn't go there because he wants IG-86 to help him explore Mandalore, even though IG-86 has been destroyed, because that's as I said earlier, that's the only droid he trusts. So we can definitely say he's more trustworthy of droids than he used to be, but he's not quite there yet. But at last, he's unable to repel IG-86, and in fact it starts attacking Grogu because it reverts back to its old programming. So it's nice how then, even though he trusts IG-88 and wants IG-88 around for this, he does not hesitate to protect Grogu. So that, I think, was a very good scene there. But it does kind of show, in a way, kind of an overarching theme in all these interactions, how the characters who are focusing on the past or somehow trapped in the past, whether it be by programming or by beliefs or just by depression in the case of bo-katan, or even the pirates that I have not talked about yet, it all doesn't work out for them. They're trapped in the past. Meanwhile, Din, who's teetering with the idea of not being trapped by the past, is still tugging on him, but he's also feeling the call to adventure, the hero's journey, if you will. He's still feeling that, and he's somewhat answering, but he's still not quite there yet. He's having success. Navarro and Grief Karga, who are not rejecting the past, who are not necessarily rejecting the past, but who are rather moving beyond the past, are prospering. The characters who are not basically living in the past are moving forward, are achieving their goals. Meanwhile, all the characters who are somehow trapped in the past, whether it be they want to hold on traditions or something along those same lines, or programming, they're trapped and they're not accomplishing. As I alluded to, the pirates, same thing. These pirates, they come to Navarro expecting things to be like the good old days. They don't get their one, so four of them end up getting shot because they try to shoot Grieved and basically shoot up the city. So the one who that survived these, but now the pirates want revenge on Din. Well, they're trapped in the past. They want things to stay the way it were, and they fail. Meanwhile, Din successfully escapes with Grogu, and I think that's the main theme of this episode. The characters who are trapped in the past, whether it be by tradition, depression, programming, lack of imagination, they're unable to achieve the goals. Meanwhile, Din and Grief and the others who are embracing change, who are not letting themselves be trapped by the past fully, in Din's case, because he's not quite there yet, but he's probably going to get there, they're the ones who are achieving their aims. And I have a thing, we probably will see maybe a mini arc of bo-katan and her, kind of getting out of her depression and embracing the change as well. It's just an instinct, I could be wrong there. But there's one more thing I would like to discuss before this episode ends. Poor girl. We actually get poor girl in this episode. It's a nice calm moment with Din and Grogu. They're just traveling through hyperspace, and Grogu is looking outside. Din's clearly taking a nap in hyperspace, but he gets to see the poor girl flying in hyperspace around Din's starfight. Like, that is such a beautiful and calming scene. It was a good midpoint for the episode, because it really was the midpoint of the episode, midpoint of all the action, all the stuff. It was just a nice little bit of found family, being calm, resting, all that while traveling through hyperspace. And the poor girl, come on, that has to be somehow a reference to Star Wars Rebels and Ezra Bridger, right? Right? We know Song was mentioned previously, and we got whatever the Ahsoka show is going to do, which is probably going to involve Ezra somehow. So there's going to be some connections there. I don't know, but let's not worry about that stuff, the connected universe. Let's just look how nice, calm it was. It was just a calm moment for our main characters, and that's why that scene is probably the most beautiful scene in this episode. And welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 18. So this is the second season of Season 3. And, well, a couple things go on. One, we get a quick return to Tatooine, but that's a side jump. It's literally a side quest. Surprisingly, the side quest of the week wasn't not a side quest. It actually didn't occur. That caught me off guard, but that's a good off guard. That's showing, taking the usual formula and twisting it, adapting it to create interesting stories. I think that was a very good direction they went. How do I say this without spoiling the episode? There's really no good way of kind of giving a hint at what's to come without spoiling the episode. But to say the least, it's an action-packed episode. It was very good. We get some insight into some characters, and I think that insight could be very important for the direction the show is going. But I'm just going to leave you there. Watch my full review later today when it comes out. And may the force be with you. Welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 18. This is the second episode of Season 3, and its title being The Mines of Mandalore. So where to begin with this episode? Well, as I mentioned back in my spoiler-free review, this episode deviates from the trend that we've seen from most of The Mandalorian so far, that being the side quest episode. Now, side quest does not mean filler, but essentially, how it was set up at the end of last episode was Din was going to retrieve a memory circuit so IG-11 could get repaired. Well, he goes to see Peli on Tatooine to find something there, but he doesn't. Instead, he gets all five to help him on, scout out Mandalore and all that. Though I was expecting a BD droid, and that would have been perfect in my opinion. That would have been perfect, but they didn't. I mean, Star Wars Jedi Survivor's coming out soon. A BD droid. Come on, that would have been good marketing and brand integration. Perfect. It would have made sense because BD droids were designed for exploration and archaeology and all that, so it would have made sense. But alas, they didn't do it. But I think there's a good reason why they didn't do it. Instead of focusing on anything like brand integration, it's focusing on Din's character journey around his acceptance of droids. Because IG-11 was the first droid Din learned to trust. That's why he wanted Din. Now he's being in a situation where he can't get IG-11 back. First, it was because he just didn't know how to reprogram. Then the droid smith was like, sorry, the necessary part to do a repair we don't have. We need one in order to repair. Now in this episode, once again, he has another roadblock. That part is not made anymore. So the only way Din can get that part back would be to scavenge it from another IG droid. That's the impression I've got. So three times he has been blocked from getting the one droid he trusts. So he's given all five. And why all five? It's a droid that he has had some interactions with before. So it's not a droid he's not totally disfamiliar with. But it's also a droid that it has feel. All five is showed frequently in this episode to be afraid. That's going to force Din to act, to do stuff. And on Mando, when all five goes off the sensor, off of the scope for his starfighter, Din agrees with basically Grogu's kind of pushing him, but agrees to seal his helmet and go outside and look for all five. Would he have done that for IG-11? Probably without a doubt, but he probably would have also trusted IG-11 much more. He would have trusted that if IG went off the scope, that IG could take care of himself. But not all five. But he still went out and did it anyhow, even though he doesn't have full trust of all five. It's not the one droid he trusts. That's the important thing why it's all five. And he needed to, once again, go out and help a droid or interact with a droid that he had not learned to trust. It's his journey of overcoming his prejudice of droids. And he also has to save all five for some creatures on Mandalore we learn used to live on Mandalore, on the outskirts of Mandalorian civilization, wild creatures. Though, I do wonder, are they actually, wild beasts? I'm just saying, could they actually be maybe the natives of Mandalore? I don't know. That could be something interesting to explore. Don't know if they will, but it would be interesting. But that was just one random thought I had. But going back to saving all five, he had to use the Darksaber to save all five. And we got the reminder that Din is clunky with the Darksaber. He does not wield it well. He finds it unwielding. He's not graceful with it. And this contrasts nicely with a scene later in the episode. So I'm just going to jump to that scene as is. So later on in the episode, Din is gotten captured by a creature. That creature, by the way, is creepy and has an organic eye. So who knows what's going on there? There's so much we could speculate. But I think it was more intended just to be a monster that is a roadblock and then trying to bathe in the waters, the mines of Mandalore, and to get redeemed. But anyhow, he's captured. Grogu goes to bo-katan for rescue. Bo-katan comes in and rescue. But in order to defeat that creature, that mechanical cyborg creature thingy, bo-katan picks up the Darksaber, and she does not struggle with it. This is in direct contrast with Din. And I think to really understand why Bo-Katan did not struggle, or Din is, we have to go all the way back to Star Wars Rebels, where Sabine learned to wield the Darksaber. When she first learned to use it, she was much more like Din, clunky. She was not wielding it well, and she had the benefit of Jedi training her, because the Darksaber is a type of lightsaber, so what Jedi understand about lightsaber could be applied to Sabine's situation, even though she, just like Din and Bo-Katan, are not Force wielders. Maybe some attunement to the Force, but are not Force wielders. And with Sabine and also Bo-Katan, they probably have for that better term, maybe a clarity of purpose. They have no baggage they're dealing with. Din is dealing with baggage. In the back of his head, we all know it's back though. He knows that the children that watch are not right. He probably does know that, but he's not willing to admit it yet. Because if he did, that would probably shatter everything he's known. Bo-Katan, everything she knew has been shattered, but though she's still kind of clinging a little bit, but she is not, in a sense, delusional, for lack of a better term. She's not being held back by the past. Sure, she's wallowing in it, but she's not being held back by it. She doesn't trust herself maybe anymore, but she's not being held back by it. No, in a sense, realizing Din was in trouble snapped her out of her depression that I theorize that she's in. And probably if she picked up the Darksaber, before she went to rescue Din and had to use it, she probably wouldn't have wielded it as smoothly as she did earlier, because she got back into things. While actually traveling with Grogu to rescue Din, she is clearly reflecting on everything that is going on. Mandalorians constantly fighting each other, and she was talking about herself, because she literally fought against her own sister. She's part of the reason why Mandalore fell, and she knows it, I think. And I think that's part of the reason why she acknowledges everything that's happened. She hasn't said it out loud to Din, Grogu, or anyone else, but she acknowledges it. And actually, she imparts some advice to Grogu, much like Din has. The first piece of advice that Din really gives Grogu in this episode actually has to deal with navigation. He specifically tells Grogu, that's Mandalore, that's Concord, the Moon Concordia, or was it Concordan? I forget which one. I get those two mixed up. And then this is where we visited Bo-Katan previously. And that was setting up so Grogu could go get Bo-Katan to rescue Din. But going back to the advice that Bo-Katan gave Grogu, it actually has to do with the relationship between the Jedi and the Mandalorians, or it's more of a history lesson. Basically, she tells Grogu that Mandalorians and Jedis were not always enemies. And I wonder, obviously, and she's probably referring to when she fought alongside Obi-Wan against Maul and Ahsoka against Maul, all that near the end of the Clone Wars, fighting with Ezra and Kanan, also during the reign of the Empire. That's probably what she's thinking of. But maybe, way back in time, back with Tar Vizsla, the first Mandalorian to become a Jedi, maybe all the way back then, the Jedi and the Mandalorians weren't enemies. That's my theory. What if at one time the Jedi and the Mandalorians were not enemies, but at least friendly with each other, if not outright friends? But something happened. Maybe something to do with Tar Vizsla and reclaiming the Darksaber. What if it's all connected? I don't know, but it's established a lot that a lot of the myths of Mandalore, Bo-Katan no longer has faith in. Meanwhile, Din is so romanticizes those faiths of those myths and legends and lore that he's unable to move beyond them, but he is moving beyond them. Kind of like I touched on in my previous review for the last episode, the characters who are beholden to the past in some form are not achieving their goals. Bo-Katan, you can definitely tell by going back to Mandalore to rescue Din. Maybe she's had her own mini awakening, hence why she was able to wield the Darksaber with ease compared to Din, who couldn't, because he has not had that awakening in himself. He has not dealt with those repercussions of the past. Sure, he's moving beyond it, but he has not acknowledged it yet among himself. And I think once he does that, he will be able to wield the Darksaber without struggle, without difficulty. Unless Grogu, I mean, it's possible. But that's kind of the heart of the episode. But there's other stuff going on, good stuff, lots of good stuff going on in this episode. Mainly, Din and Bo-katan and Grogu, of course, do arrive at the mines of the Mandalore with the living waters, and Din goes to recite the creed and redeem himself by bathing in those waters. So he's either pulled down, but I think actually he just was not paying attention and he fell off the last step in the water. But Bo-katan dives down to rescue Din again, the second time this episode. But on the way up, she sees a missile. Earlier in that episode, right before Din falls into the water, she's reading a plaque talking about the history of the mines of Mandalore and the waters there, and how it was legend had it that it was the layer of a missile. That's connecting, like, in a way, she's rediscovering her faith in the Mandalorian myths and legends, and like the other stuff probably Din was taught as a founding with the children to watch, but he romanticized them. Well, Bo-katan, she's not romanticizing them. She's doing the quite opposite. So maybe somewhere in the middle, they can meet and truly get help move Mandalorian forward with a new way. So my theory going forward is both of them are going to work together to lead Mandalore to the future. Perhaps maybe a more democratic Mandalore, who knows? But because they made multiple mentions to Mandalore's royal family and how Bo-katan was a part of it, and how as a child, as a part of the royal family, she took the creed in those waters, etc., etc. Why are they mentioning that if not either three things could be happening. One, they're going to get rid of that method of choosing the leader and form maybe something more democratic, or Din's going to create a new leadership dynasty, or Bo-katan's going to come in. They're not going to mention Bo-katan being from a royal family unless it's going to play a role in later episodes, and how it could come in conflict with the children of the Watch. It's only a matter of time, but Din needs to realize the children of the Watch are a Mandalorian cult. They're Mandalorians, yes, but they're extremists. They're even probably more extreme than the Death Watch, which I'm going to assume the children of the Watch were born out of. Probably thinking the Death Watch was not, extreme enough, infighting, if you will. It's just a theory I have, but yeah, I do think we're going towards something about a new Mandalorian society being formed that take elements from the old, but does not, it's not letting the past die like some people will advocate for, but it's also not living in the past as some people will advocate for. It's the healthy respect for the past, along with not being blinded and beholden to it. And then a few other things I would like to mention. I'll go back to Tatooine mainly. The opening scene with Peli. It's like she and Jawas are working together to scam speeder owners into repairs. It's just hilarious. All doing Boon to Eve, which connects nicely back to episode 1, because that was the Pod Racer Anakin one, was the Boon to Eve classic. So those world building elements that this is some event going on this planet. Who cares what it is? But yeah. And actually, Boba Fett did get a mention, and he's a third type of person, Mandalorian. You have Bo-katan, who's probably what you could say, embodying more of the standard Mandalorian society in some ways. The Mandalorian, or maybe better yet, the royalness of the Mandalorian society, the lineage. Then you have the children of the Watch, who are all about tradition and following tradition originally. And then you got Bo-katan, like, my father was a Mandalorian, therefore I'm a Mandalorian. And that's really about all he needs to know. Like, could somehow all that come together? Because why mention Boba Fett unless he's going to play a role in it in the story as another perspective on what it means to be a Mandalorian? It's just a thought, but I think that is where I'm going to end this review. And welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 19. So I'm going to begin with by saying this was a phenomenal episode, but it's another break in the formula. This is 2 for 2, or 2 for 3, I should say, of The Mandalorian breaking its formula, which is very interesting. Not to mention, I get some Andor vibes from the second storyline, actually, I felt like it was the A story, not the B story, given the fact that it took the center chunk of the episode, and the story actually involving Din and Grogu and also Bo-katan, the Mandalorians, were the bookends. So that felt more like a B story in this. The Mandalorian felt like a B story in his own show. Kind of like what happened with Boba Fett. in his own show and didn't start showing up. But that's neither here nor there. But I did find it was very interesting. But the themes are connected, and I will be exploring that in my full review. And I have a feeling it's all going to come together in a later episode, but that's a discussion for my full review. But in the meantime, this is the way. And welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 19, The Convert. So this is the third episode of the third season. Hey, 3-3. Hey, that's a nice coincidence there. But yeah, so as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, this very much felt like the first episode where we had a true A plot and B plot. And surprisingly, the A plot didn't feature Din in any of the Mandalorians at all. At least I thought it was an A plot, since it was the central part of the episode and took up the most time. And felt like an straight out of Star Wars Andor. Like, this is probably the most political thriller we've seen in The Mandalorian so far. So that's going on. Basically, the Dr. Pershing from the previous seasons that Colonial working with the Empire. Basically, we're following him in his life on Coruscant as part of an amnesty program for Imperials. And we actually get to see the communications officer that went Imperial from Moff Gideon's ship. Well, she's up to something, because at first, like, oh, maybe she truly defected to the New Republic and is trying to, maneuver for more Imperials in the amnesty program who are not truly loyal to the Republic yet into being loyal, getting them caught acting up, but at the same time, it's like, but is she really? Because at the end of the New Republic, using a basically reduced power version of an Imperial claim is like, oh, here's some soothing, go and get rid of all your Imperial tendencies. Probably not really quite understanding how the brain actually works. Because Dr. Pershing, like, he has an itch to continue doing his research, which the New Republic is a no on. Not to mention, what he's doing, man, a little better than what Theo Khan was doing on Coruscant to the Mandalorian, but still just looks like grueling office work. But anyhow, so that one Imperial, former Imperial, I'm still gonna call her an Imperial, because why did she turn on that machine with the New Republic for basically trying to using technology to rehabilitate Theo Khan? Why did she turn it all the way up when it sounds like New Republic only used the most minor of the settings instead of scrambling the brain? Just like, we're gonna give you a nice, calm, peaceful experience. Still practically brainwashing. Kind of shows that the New Republic has not fully, is like, they did not probably dismantle the machines of the Empire, the machines of war. They did not do that. And so that rot is still there. The rot of the old Republic is still there. They never really addressed it. That's something I hope they do after the sequel, to truly address that rot. Because there's a whole scene where essentially the leads of Coruscant are joking around after Pershing gives a talk. Basically, a talk that's probably designed to promote the amnesty program for Imperials, but in the form, which is in the former Coruscant opera that we saw in Attack of the Clones. But anyhow, they're like Republic, Empire, New Rebels, doesn't really matter. Basically, they didn't like the outer rim. Like, they're the elites, they're aloof, out of touch. We saw this in The Last Jedi as well. And this is also the same sentiment that Mayfield had at the start of, I forget the episode's name, but he had as well. He saw them all as the same, but came to realize that, no, there is some substantial difference. Yes, the New Republic and the Rebels had their problems. We are seeing that now, and we're seeing probably the original problems, the radicals and the realists in Star Wars Andor, and some of those issues, like, basically, the Rebels and the Republic ain't all sunshine and rainbows, but they're still significantly better than the Empire. But that still doesn't mean that the New Republic can't do better. I'm just saying. But so kind of going with that crazy ramble, back to what's going on. Like, why does she turn that dial all the way up? Makes me wonder if she's still somehow loyal to the Empire and is being a double agent, a spy, if you will. I don't know, but it's a thought. But there's a lot to break down, though. I might actually make some additional shorts as I come up with new ideas watching other people's reviews, because there is so much there that I could break down and discuss. There is just so much. I'm still processing it. But let's actually address everything within the B plot of the episode. It's kind of interesting how his story, the Mandalorian story, becomes a B plot. Kind of like what happened in Book of Boba Fett when Din showed up. Not quite the same, because they still do a good job, because I think they wanted to show a contrast with from Dr. Pershing and also bo-katan. Because somehow by the end of the episode, bo-katan accidentally joins the Children of the Watch. I don't think she was intending of it, but at the same time, everything she had known has been destroyed. And here's this group, because of her rescuing Din last episode, meaning she bathed in the waters of Mandalore, that means now that they are willing to accept her despite her past transgressions. I do find that kind of interesting, and will this that sense of community, the word I'm looking for, will that sense of community basically draw her into the code, make her forget about, her ideals, her values, the idea that, no, we can't be all this dogmatic. But being Mandalorian, take helmet on and off doesn't matter. But like, I do wonder, could something like that, there's that sense of community could get entrapped, if you will. I don't know. We need to see that, but it's kind of interesting there. But yeah, Bo-Katan truly lost everything. Because she lost Mandalore, but now she actually lost her home, her family, her clan's home world, or at least the castle. Like, she truly lost that. Like, so everything she once had is now gone. She mentioned she was disaster for family, so we already know that her sister died. We saw that in the Clone Wars, and we also know probably then that means her and her sister's nephew Koki is also dead as well. So like those are Satine and Koki were the only two members besides her father that we've ever had mentioned in canon. There probably was a mother too, but like she has like no family left. So will the Children of the Watch be like she's finding that sense of community, the sense of belonging that she's lost by fighting because of the Empire, but also just the forces of evil in the galaxy as a whole. I do wonder how would that affect her character and her character development going forward. And also gotta mention that Din still needs to understand that the Children of the Watch is a cult. We know that Bo-Katan knows that intellectually, but emotions can sometimes impact, and that's what's holding Din back. Ever so slightly holding him back. But like I say, I was pleasantly surprised that the Armorer didn't try to obfuscate it. Yep, you bathed in the waters of Mandalore, you have your proof, everything's good. Like, yeah, I was surprised that she was so accepting of that. So maybe there's a chance that she could become more accepting to a looser interpretation of the creed. Anyhow, I personally think the creed, basically the helmet rule, was don't take your helmet off in battle when you're serving as a warrior. That's what I think it originally meant, but it got twisted over the years. That happens a lot of the time with legends, folklore, and traditions. Things get twisted in that where they don't resemble the original form anymore. You see that a lot. You see that a lot. Hence why there's so many splinter factions of Christianity. Just some real world examples there. But yeah, that's probably the main stuff I want to mention. There's probably a few other things I could mention as well, but that's the main stuff I wanted to mention. So yeah, I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 20. So to begin with, this is probably one of the shortest episodes to date for The Mandalorian, but what it has to say really packs a punch. There's a lot to go on. I think the most important thing I can say about this episode is that it shows the Children of the Watch at their best. Because let's be real, they are a cult, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all bad. It's just the strict adherence to the rules and the inflexibility in some of that. But this episode shows the good elements, the elements that that as hopefully they grow, they don't lose. But I'll explain more of that in my full review. And welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 20, The Founding. So, as I alluded to in my spoiler-free review, this is a short episode, but it packs a lot of punch. Namely, it goes to show the good elements of the Children's Watch. Yes, they are a cult, but there is some good elements. Namely, the protecting the community. That's what's good, Going to rescue Padme the son, they do that. Things like that. Like, really, this episode shows the good of the Children of the Watch, the internal good, mainly protecting one another, looking out for one another, willing to sacrifice one another to save another. That's the good stuff, protecting one's community. The problem being, of course, them being caught in the strict adherence to the rules, including, keeping the helmet on all the time. Like, they don't need that for everything else, for the protecting one's community. They don't need that. But probably, with everything that's happened to the Mandalorian since the Clone Wars, like, they've retreated to the old ways rather than keeping the new ways and adapting to the changing world. They just regressed in, for lack of a better term. But this episode does show that they can still keep some of they can move beyond, if they chose to, they can move beyond the dogmatic elements while still keeping the core of what it means to be Mandalorian. Hopefully that's something bo-katan can make them realize, perhaps. But who knows? Oh, damn, with Grogu. I mean, I have a feeling Grogu may not want to put his helmet on because, after all, he did survive Order 66 and he saw clones, so, he may not be the most pleased about having a helmet on him someday. I'm just saying. But speaking of Grogu, we do get another flashback to his training, or more accurately, to Order 66, and him being rescued by the Jedi. Yes, he was rescued by a Jedi, specifically a Jedi played by Ahmed Best. Specifically, a Jedi that he played in Jedi Temple Challenges. I forget the name, but was nicknamed by the younglings in the canon, the Saber Fist, something like that. Which, yeah, but it's just neat. Like, so we get to see essentially how Grogu survived Order 66 in the temple. So it doesn't explain how he got to where Din rescued him. But surprise though, one thing to note is the ship that Ahmed Best's character and Grogu escape on is a Naboo starship. Pretty interesting. And whoever prepared that ship for him, I think they might be Nabooians, but they specifically stayed behind to help defend, to hold off the clones while Ahmed Best and Grogu escape. I think that's kind of interesting though. I'm just saying, it's kind of interesting with that development. But it does make good sense, but I like seeing it. But like getting that more insight into Grogu and all that. There's so much good in the episode, like just showing the community of the Children of the Watch, the good aspects of it, not the cult aspects, but the community aspects. Training with each other, protecting each other. That's the good stuff, and I'm glad we got to see that. And hopefully, we'll see them realize that they can keep that and take their helmets off, because we learned that Ragnar, the children, the founder who got his helmet a couple episodes back, is Paz Vizsla's son. I mean, there could be a moment with that, where Paz wants to see his son's face again. We don't know, but that could, get the wheels turning. I don't know. But we also got, the sincere, this is the way. And all of it is normal response to, a person laying down their lives and protecting their community. Just something to take a note of. But those are just my thoughts on this episode. What are yours? I would love to hear them in the comment section down below. And welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 21. So with the 4 previous episodes of The Mandalorian, all of them were good, but this one was good in such a different way. This, I think, might be actually one of the best episodes so far, mainly because this is the first episode where I feel like every plot thread that they've introduced in previous episodes are being tied up together. Though I feel like the first one where every plot line, every thread, like, all of them are, you can say, we're just weaving around in a bunch of different ways, intersecting at random points. But this is the first episode where I felt all those different plot threads have come together in such a way that I can predict going forward that they'll tell one cohesive story. That's why I think this episode's main purpose was to bring all these elements together, and also maybe a subtle teaser and some tie-in for what's probably going to happen in the Ahsoka show as well. But that all remains to be seen. But yeah, and welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 21. So this is the 5th episode of the 3rd season, the episode being entitled The Pirate. So what happens in this episode? Well, pirates attack Navarro. Pretty simple. So Grief Karga sends a message out to the New Republic, actually, requesting for help. Specifically, that one New Republic pilot, I forget his name, that we saw in the previous season, as a specific point in contact. And he then, because he was back basically from command, he goes personally to Coruscant to request permission to go help Navarro. He doesn't get it. And this is actually, he gives a line from the trailer where that basically the New Republic, the Code, doesn't know what's going on in the Outer Rim. Him being though, he does, and we've seen this Republic pilot several times as well. And actually this time we get to see him with another familiar character. Any guesses? I mean, I can't believe that. I was like, that sounds a lot like Zeb. Check the credits, it's the same voice actor. So yes, Zeb makes an appearance in live action. I can't believe they actually did that. And that's what I alluded to in my So a few of you could be setting up the Ahsoka show a little bit, because Ahsoka was in Rebels, so was Zeb. But another character making the jump from animation to live action. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. But I just really love that little tidbit, that little bit of the scene there. Even though I can't remember the past name, that's not the important part. His name, sure, it might be good for me to remember, but it's not important to the plot, because what he decides to do is he decides to track down the Mandalorians to get them to help liberate Navarro from the pirates, who basically forced Grief Karga and all the citizens, well, not all, some of them didn't make it in time, to evacuate. Some, like a bartender, like, got stuck behind, for example. But that's, and you know how the new Republic found it? All five. Like, I honestly didn't expect that to happen, but he mentioned that a member of the Cold Force was served with him in the rebellion. Like, all the men started looking at each other, and all five just rose forward, and he just thinks all five. Like, I just love that little scene right there, because yeah, it does kind of make sense, especially with what we know about all five. And yes, I have it over there, but yes, all five has a point of view book, and from a certain point of view for the original one back for the 40th anniversary of A New Hope. But that's neither here or there, because, well, the Mandalorians have basically a council. Din speaks, and then Paz Vizsla speaks. Din obviously in support of helping Grief Karga and the citizens of Navarro. But when Paz Vizsla first stands up and he begins speaking, like, he's going to say no. But then he turns it around and says why they should go help, because that is such a good thing, and then at the end they all give and Cecile this is a way, like, truly, helping other people, like establishing the good, like I was saying in the previous episode, but really establishing what probably the Mandalorian Creed should be focused on. Not the dumb archaic rules like do you need to keep your helmet on, not that kind of stuff, but really, the community and helping each other. That's what this scene was all about. And I kind of liked how they used one of the armor's helmets as basically a stick whoever's holding it gets to speak. I just thought that was just a little neat thing to help to show the sense of community, and how when they were planning having these kinds of councils, there's an order of it, so everyone has a chance to speak, but also everyone knows who is speaking. That's not a bad idea when you think about it. But so the Mandalorians go and help the citizens of Navarro, and they defeat the pirates. Only one pirate escapes, and that's being like the first officer. And I'm pretty sure there's some connection to what's going on with the Empire, because the new Republic, he's convinced something more is going on, and the Empire is somehow connected. Because he wasn't sure because like mentioned a couple episodes ago in the converse, there was rumors that Moff Gideon never made it to trial, and this new Republic has heard the same thing. So he's convinced something more is going on, hence why he wanted to stop the pirates, because he thinks they could be getting some backing from the Empire, the Imperial remnants. And as we know from Star Wars Resistance, the First Order was not beyond using pirates to attack stations and places of interest. So we could be seeing that kind of play out here, but no one's really put the pieces together yet. Some people are trying, but not everyone is succeeding. I mean, there's a nice little connection there, and I really do appreciate how. No, before one thing I already mentioned from from Star Wars Rebels. Well, here's a similar tactic being sought. We're thinking a similar tactic is being used that we saw in Star Wars Resistance, using pirates to maybe get people to flock back to the Empire. Oh, the First Order in some case. But I can see how it's all building these pieces together, and I really appreciate it. It's bringing all these desperate elements. The elements from what would have been the Rangers of the New Republic. It's like it's all coming together. Now, it does seem like, though, probably the biggest fault is Din and Grogu are getting sidelined in their own show. It really does feel like that, especially when we see the conversation that Bo-Katan and the armor had, where the armor told Bo-Katan she can take her helmet off because she walks both ways, and the idea the armor wants her to help bring Mandalorians there and help reunite all the Mandalorians together, which obviously is appealing to Mandalorian, to Bo-Katan, and also kind of confirms that the armor does believe that Bo-Katan saw a missile. So I still think the titular Mandalorian is probably going to end up being Grogu. I'm just saying, but he's still a toddler right now. Other people have to create the way for him, lead the way for him until he is old enough. I'm just saying. But Mandalorian Jedi coming up. That's my prediction. But yeah, I do find it very interesting. But at the same time, a lot of what's happened to Bo-Katan, she's not displaying agency in these decisions for her. But at the same time, I think that does fit with everything. Like, pretty much the only thing she had agency of is rescuing Din. Everything else she's just been coasting along. But even then, like, the plot is happening around her and to her. She's not making decisions yet that are truly impacting the plot, except for coming up with the plan to rescue Paz with the sun, which probably help Paz support them going to rescue the citizens of Navarro. And then they all, as we will get a pretty nice track of land with apparently one of the features marking the land being named after the actor that played Boba Fett in the original trilogy. But one thing I'm thinking is, because let's remember, when we first saw her, and I said this in my review, she appears to have some form of depression. And so I think in many ways right now she's going through the motions. So perhaps her character journey will be learning to take action for herself once again. But that's just a thought, I could be wrong. But all this is kind of, like I said earlier, sidelining Grogu and Din. Why is that? They're gonna be important. It's their show after all. But perhaps it's because there has, like, the basically a status quo has been established for them. Din has gotten redeemed, which is what he wanted, and Grogu is still young training. So until Grogu is old enough, and thus, or should I say, until Grogu is speaking, where he could potentially recite the creed and get his helmet, I don't think anything story wise, development wise, can happen to them yet. Because their story is about the relationship with each other. It's about the father son bond. So really, until the creed comes up again and Grogu can get a helmet and take the creed, there is nothing driving them apart anymore. Granted, I have a suspicion that if things had gone slightly differently in some behind the scenes stuff, the horror we saw in the book Boba Fett with Din and Grogu reuniting would have happened in this season. It would have been stretched out a little bit differently. Canceling of Rangers of the New Republic, I think, really affected how they were going to tell some of their stories in the sequel, in this between the original and sequel trilogies. So I do want to acknowledge that that's probably a possibility that's creating this kind of real gap in the story, because I have a feeling the story we're getting right now for with the Mandalorians as a whole with the New Republic, and Moff Gideon and all that. I have a feeling all that was going to be told in Rangers of the New Republic. Maybe not necessarily all the Mandalorian stuff, but be told there. But because of the canceling of that show, they've had to change their production order around and where stories are told. And so I think that's creating some dissonance between the different story elements in the shows. But even despite that, they're doing a pretty good job trying to bring them all together. Like I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, all these different plot elements that they are shoving into the show, they are bringing together. But I do hope we do get something, even in cinema too, that helps flesh out some of the stuff like Din and Grogu were doing when they were separate. Because I have a feeling that was the original plan for season 3. But I feel like I'm rambling off on that. Probably should talk about the ending with Moff Gideon. Well, he doesn't appear, but the New Republic platform, apparently he's on a patrol and finds a old Lambert class shuttle that's been destroyed. Turns out it was a New Republic prison transport, specifically the one that Moff Gideon was on. And they send him and his droid, which actually the probe is from his droid, like the scope like we see on R2D2, but now goes in to scout the shuttle, and apparently there's traces of Mandalorian Beskar. So that implies that Mandalorians rescued Moff Gideon. Of course, Mandalorians are fractured right now. So one, we know that Moff Gideon's Imperial Remnant had access to Beskar. We also know that Moff Gideon probably looted Mandalore, and we also know that there are Mandalorians who are scattered. So, either Imperials using, or Imperial Remnant using Mandalorian equipment and armor, or it could be some Mandalorians hired by the Imperial Remnant to rescue Moff Gideon, or it could be something else. Some Mandalorians wanted Moff Gideon killed, so they could have destroyed his shuttle and are putting him on trial where they're going to execute him. I mean, it's all different possibilities. But that could also create some friction between Mandalorians and the New Republic, which could then go on to explain why, in the sequel trilogy, we don't see any Mandalorians helping the New Republic or the Resistance. Maybe some bad blood was created between those two societies. it's a possibility. But so I'm adding this in post because I forgot to mention this and it is kind of important. So when New Republic pilot was speaking with Zeb about going to about the message from Grief Cargo and all that, one of the characters on the side, it looked like it's Dave Filoni. I checked the credits. Yep, it was Trapper Wolf, the New Republic pilot that he played a few episodes back in season 1 and season 2. But this, the New Republic pilot, whose name I just looked up, which is Captain Carson Trevor. Good thing I looked that up because I couldn't remember doing the main recording. But anyhow, when he's speaking with the New Republic Recreations Officer and all that on Coruscant, a certain somebody appears there. Yes, that's right. I forget her name, but that Imperial Communications Officer, who I'm pretty much convinced is a plant by Moff Gideon in the New Republic. She's the one who scrambled Dr. Pershing's brain. Well, I presume his brain is now scrambled since he didn't appeal. But I just kind of wanted to make this little addendum, tacking it on at the end of the video. Just kind of addressing those kind of plot points that I have forgot to mention, but I think are kind of important to what's going forward. Okay, the Dave Filoni cameo of Chopper Wolf, that's just a minor thing, though. Apparently, a few other directors have also made an appearance looking at the guest starring, but that's really just a minor thing because I really wanted more than anything to mention how I'm pretty sure Moff Gideon has a plant in the New Republic and is encouraging the New Republic's apathy, if you will. The idea that these people, they're outside the Republic, we don't need to help them, which would help the Imperial Remnant or maybe the First Order's cause as well. But that's just a little bit I wanted to add on before I finished up my review. So let's go finish it up, and I'll see you guys in another time. There is so much coming together that I think we're in store for some very exciting and suspenseful, action-packed episodes. But in the meantime, let me know your thoughts on the pirate in the comment section down below. I know I didn't talk about the pirates too much, but I did appreciate how it's being alluded to that these pirates are on the payroll of the Imperial Remnant or Proto First Order, just like the pirates were in Star Wars Resistance. Welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 22, the 6th episode of the 3rd season. So this was another great episode, and it gets to explore two, I think, very important concepts for the remaining 2 episodes in the season, because I'm presuming there's going to be 8 episodes like all the other seasons. The first is Din's PTSD surrounding droids and how, even though he has grown, it still is affecting his behavior. I'll explain more in my full review. Same thing, I'm going to explain more about bo-katan's story and leadership of Mandalore. Both those 2 concepts were explored once again this episode, and I have a feeling they will explore here to set up what's going to happen next. And welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 22, Guns for Hire. So this is the 6th episode of the 3rd season, and let's take a note at the title, Guns for Hire. It's not The Mandalorian, or The Child, or The Heiress, or The Convert, or The Apostate. No, it's Guns for Hire. There's no The in it. I can't remember if any of the other episodes in seasons 1 and 2 had a similar title, but I think it does fit because this episode kind of does break a little bit from what's going on. It's basically the plot of the episode is bo-katan's basically meeting up with Guns for Hire. Very simple, but basically she's trying to regain leadership of the Mandalorians who once pledged loyalty to her, who are now mercenaries or Guns for Hire. We see them acting as Guns for Hire in the beginning, where they retrieve a Mon Calamari prince who ran off with his quarreling girlfriend. And sure, because of who's paying them, they just do it, even though probably the right thing would have been just to let them live their lives. But they're going based off of who's making more money. Or who's giving them more money, I should say. So their loyalty is being paid for. They don't have any other loyalties. And I have a feeling we're going to see with that develop, maybe them realize that, hey, we can be Mandalorians, proper Mandalorians or something. I don't know, but it's setting up how these Mandalorians are behaving at this time. In fact, this episode does portray some contrast to this group of Mandalorians and the Children of the Watch, kind of extra through what we already see. They both have preconceptions on who is a Mandalorian and who isn't a Mandalorian. By the end of the episode, I'm jumping ahead here, but Bo-Katan and Din finally meet up with them, and And the thing is, they dismissed Din because he wasn't born Mandalorian. Meanwhile, Din, when he first met Axe, he dismissed him as not being Mandalorian because he removed his helmet. Seems like a bunch of Mandalorians. Seems like a bunch of Mandalorians are stuck up on who is a Mandalorian based off of archaic rules. For the children to watch, it's taking the creed and not taking your helmet off. For these Mandalorians, it's, well, are you descendant from Mandalorians who once took the creed? You don't have to, but you have to be descended from them. It's like all these different rules, and I'm pretty sure there's other groups with totally different sets of rules too. But that's, and what we see with Bo-Katan in that scene is she's tired of Mandalorians fighting over trivia stuff like who is and who isn't a Mandalorian. You can see she's coming around to that. And in fact, that does kind of connect nicely with what the Armorer said to Bo-Katan in the last episode, that she walks both ways. In many ways, that is kind of true. She has taken the creed, but she's also a descendant from Mandalorians. So she's kind of got both worlds going on there. She probably only took it because she's from the royal family, but still took the creed because she was in the royal family and probably certain procedures she had to follow which she didn't really care for. But still, it is kind of interesting. And we also get stuff with the Darksaber. And this is, so Din does give Bo-Katan the Darksaber using the logic that many of us have dismissed as, that's now how the Darksaber works, the idea that, well, whoever defeated the person who defeated who did, kind of feels like an Elder One rules from Harry Potter. I really don't care for that as much, but at least with the Darksaber, it's not something that can never be won in the mist, so at least that's a little better. But I think what it is showing Din is not going to be the Mandalorian, or more accurately, he's not going to be Mandalore. I think that's still going to be Grogu, but he's too young at this time, so somebody needs to be in charge. But what is all the other Mandalorians accepted that sure, Bo-Katan didn't need to win it from Din, but since Bo-Katan defeated who defeated Din, it works, even though that person never claimed the Darksaber, which that could affect it, but Din does not mention that. But I think what's important to note here is the most major elements in Bo-Katan's story is happening to her. She's not affecting the plot. She's like a Disney princess, for crying out loud, especially the early ones where the plot happens around them and they react it. And I think that could because Bo-Katan is still depressed. When we first saw her this season, she was sulking. Like, put a pint or so of ice cream and half a spoon in it, and like, yeah, she was acting depressed. And I still think she has not come out of her depression yet. She's still just going with the flow, for lack of a better term. She wouldn't have rescued Din if not for Grogu. Sure, she took action during the rescue and did affect the plot a little bit, but would she have gone there if not for Grogu? And same thing, would she have inadvertently joined the children in the watch if not for Din taking her there? Now, granted, I think this is the one element where she did take charge, where she did affect the plot. When Paz's son was taken by that pterodactyl-like creature, and she steps up and creates a mission, needs a mission to rescue him. Like, that's when she took control of the plot. But then when after they liberate Navarro, sure, she's involved in doing stuff, but plot-wise, she's being affected by it. Then the armor tells her to take her helmet off and go reunite Mandalorians. Well, she didn't make that decision. She was told to do it. And again in this episode, when she got the Darksaber, she was given it to it. Except for when she took control to rescue a foundling, she has not made any choices that have advanced the plot. She's made choices because of other people, other characters and events advancing the plot, but only one has she truly advanced the plot. Rescuing a foundling. Protecting. That is what I want to take away. That's what I'm trying to say here is that's the only time she took initiative. She had agency in the plot. All the other times the plot's been happening to her. And that's, I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm liking it because, well, in some ways, like, why is the female lead the one who the plot is happening to? But I don't think it's because she's female. I think it's because she's depressed. And I think her journeys through this episode, or through the series, is her learning to take agency in her own story once again. Because she challenged Axe to leadership of the fleet that she had previously gathered and lost control of. She made that choice. She could have done it. She could have regain their control in other ways, though that was probably the most effective way. But she could say, Din supports me and he has a dark saber, so you should support me as well. She could have done that, but she chose to do a challenge, but also chose not to harm. And since this is, well, that's minor. I didn't mention before because I was trying to paint a narrative there, but I'm bringing it in now because it connects back up with saving the founding. She's sick of Mandalorian blood being spilled and she just wants to protect other Mandalorians. I think that's all she has left, all that she feels a calling for, if you will. She saw the Mythosaur, but she's still unsure about herself and with all that. So what I'm thinking is her coming story, which I've talked about a lot in this review so far, is this. She's not gonna feel calling for anything to do except for to protect other Mandalorians. I honestly don't think she feels a calling for anything else anymore. Even leadership, I don't feel like she feels a calling for. And everything that's not protecting a Mandalorian, she's just letting the plot happen to her, which is interesting to note. But that comes in nicely with Din and his PTSD with droids. Okay, that's a terrible transition, but we're going with it. Because the plane that the Mandalorians have been hired to protect for most of the episode, they're just off waiting for threats. But in the city, a bunch of reprogrammed droids are going haywire. And because of complicated legal loopholes, because one of the leaders of the plane is a member of the Amnesty program, who turns out no problem at all, was actually the head of security for the planet, who was a former separatist. So there's that. But one interesting thing to note there is Din is confronted with his PTSD around the droids. Did he regress? I don't think so, because a lot of these droids were bad droids, so he regressed, but it was because of PTSD, not because of anything else. Acting out irrationally because of his PTSD. It's kind of similar to how bo-katan's story has been dictated by her depression, which is keeping her from taking the initiative, taking action, and major plot beats, story beats for her character. Meanwhile, here's Din, who's been doing pretty well this season so far, but the minute he's confronted with droids of his past, the droids that killed his family, nearly killed him, if not for Mandalorians, he regresses, he lashes out because the PTSD takes control of his logical reasoning. Like Kyo said back all the way in episode 2, actually it may have been a different episode, but back in season 1, Kyo the Ugnaught basically said that droids like children are programmed by the adults around them. And what it is Din has regressed to his program, just like these droids are, because of the sabotage by the head of security. It's a symptom of the same cause. The past is coming in and affecting their ability to go forward in the future. Bo-katan's depression about the past is also holding her back. In some ways, is every villain or every stumbling block our characters are truly facing has to revolve around the past. Bo-katan, depressed at losing control of Mandalore and all the things she sees as her fault for Mandalore's fault. Din, his PTSD around droids is the past. Grogu, he doesn't seem to be held back by the past, which is interesting. He shows off his force abilities in this episode a couple of different times. Sometimes suddenly, sometimes not, but still. It's all of the past. The head of security longs for, independence, separatism. That's holding him back. Let's go back to the Coruscant episode a few episodes back, where we got to see Dr. Pershing again and that one other former Imperial. She's being held back by the past, so was he, longing to continue his research for what sake? See, it's basically, it seems like the past is holding every single character back, or is the motivation behind the antagonists or villains of the episodes. It's all connected to the past. And I think what it is we're exploring this concept specifically among Mandalorians, but we're seeing the past somehow, a character beholding the past, or if the past affecting them, bringing it forward and affecting them in the future. The former Duchess of the planet, well, she's an elected Duchess now, and then her husband, who's a former Imperial who's under the Amnesty program, they're not held by the past. They fell in love, married, and also created a direct democracy. All they have to do is administer the planet, but the citizens are basically in charge of making policy and making laws, and they just get to, well, except for when they're they're administrating the laws, they just get to relax and have fun like they would normally do. Because this planet is not being held back by the past. But everyone around this planet is. The reason why this planet seems so tranquil is because they're not being beholden to the past. Yes, the past is a part of them. They're using the old droids to help them, and we find out by these droids that they don't mind doing the work because they want to do the work, and they don't want the jobs taken by humans. Actually, I do quite like that. I kind of start to reverse on the fears of humans and organics are always afraid in most sci-fi of droids and robots taking over their jobs, but here the droids are afraid of humans doing the exact same thing to them, which is kind of fascinating. But essentially, they're they're worried that these malfunctions that the head of security that we find out later causes will cause them to lose their purpose and they'll be scrapped. It's kind of interesting to note those things but these droids, most of them are not being held back by the past, so they're happy working. They want to work. But a few droids, because of the reprogramming based by the chief head of security, cause them to regress to the past, cause them to lash out malfunction, causing problems. It's see how this is all connected. It's all about people who are letting the past control them, or letting control them, or letting the past control them in some fashion. That's what all the roadblocks seem to be leading to this season, or in this season. So that is something interesting to know. I could talk more about the episode, but I think there's one last thing I would like to mention before I close out this review. Grogu. So during this episode, he hangs out with the Duchess and her husband the entire time, who are apparently played by celebrities, same thing with the head of security. I didn't recognize them, I'll tell you that much. But what I really liked about this at the very end, actually not at the very end, but before that, you know, he's showing off his force, he feels comfortable. He helps the Duchess win a game using the force. Don't know if she realizes it, but still. But at the end, I think she might, because she knights Grogu. So Grogu is now technically a knight, not a Jedi Knight, but still. But what I really like about seeing is Grogu being knighted in some form, because he is both Mandalorian and Jedi, and this knighting, while not being knighted as a knight of the Jedi Order, is still a knighting, so he can call himself a knight. Like that does tell me that he's probably going to get his first piece of Mandalorian gear or helmet or something soon, because I think it's showing that he's going to be like bo-katan, walking two ways. Bo-katan's walking both ways of being Mandalorian, but I think Grogu is going to walk both the ways of Mandalore and the ways of the Jedi. And that's why I do think that Grogu is going to be Mandalore someday. The titular Mandalorian is Grogu, but he's still too young, so we're seeing these elements of Mandalorians in characters around him. Bo-Katan is the leader. She just needs to get over her depression of revolving around the past. Din is the soldier and the caregiver. Like, it's all like all the different aspects of Mandalorian society that Grogu, I think, will come to embody are being presented in all the different characters around him. And Bo-Katan and Din are being the primary role models for him, but I think that's a good thing. But even the other Mandalorians as well. But we gotta wait to see for how that develops. Actually, I was going to end my review here, but I just remembered something else. When investigating the droid malfunction, they go meet with the Ugnaughts, who seem to be like the only people who are actually doing regular work. But because of Din's experience with Quill, he knows how to talk to the Ugnaughts. You know how there's always a show that says, and you don't insult their work. And because of that, they were able to get a lead on what's going on. And all because of everything that Din learned way back in season 1 with Quill. And he even mentions Quill by name, so I do appreciate that. It helped show that those events affected him in a positive way. Quill is also the one who taught him to be diplomatic with the Jawas, which, speaking of, later on when he had to communicate with the Tusken Raiders in both the Marshal and the Gunslinger, I believe those 2 episodes, would he have been able to do it without learning that diplomacy is the way to go from Quill? It's kind of an interesting thought, but that's actually where it comes back to his PTSD with droids. He fails to do diplomacy with the droids because of his PTSD, and how his PTSD with the droids is that past holding him back. It's kind of interesting there. See, I was able to connect this all back up. But that is where I'm going to end this review. But let's keep the discussion going. Let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comment section down below. And welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 23. And I have to say, this was one exciting, jam-packed episode. It was just one event after another after another. Lots of plot threads were dropped that I think will be very important in the season finale next week, but also important in the upcoming Ahsoka show as well. And I think also some good thematic stuff going in. Some more, because this season has been a little bit lacking with Din and Grogu's relationship as father and son, but I think this episode brings it back in so that way whatever happens in the next episode will make sense. I do think that's what was being set up. I think that's going to cover most of my spoiler-free thoughts. And welcome to my full review of The Mandalorian Chapter 3. So this is the 7th episode of Season 3, and it's entitled The Spies. So this was another phenomenal episode. Like I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, it was jam-packed full of action, adventure, and it was just one plot beat right after another. But before we go too far in, let's talk about the title, The Spies. Well, the opening sequence we have that Imperial, who's in the Amnesty program, well, confirms that she's a spy from Moff Gideon. But it's spies plural, not the spy, the spies. And that was more just set up, confirming Moff Gideon's back and letting him know that the Mandalorians are basically starting to unite up together, and that the pirates that the Mandalorians liberated and evolved from are somehow connected with everything going on in the Imperial Remnant. Like, all that is all connected, but there has to be more spies, right? Sure, we get to see an Imperial Shadow Council for the Imperial Remnant, which included two faces that should be familiar. Well, one face is definitely familiar, and I'm not talking about Moff Gideon. No, Captain Pelion. And also we got a reference to Commodore Hux, so General Hux's father. So that is another interesting to note. But essentially, it sounds like a bunch of Imperial remnants are all working together to restore the Empire, but they all really want power from each other. And of course, Grand Admiral Thrawn is still missing, and Captain Pelion keeps on saying his return is going to be coming soon, but the other Imperials are clearly like, not necessarily not buying, but more like, yeah, it's taking him a while, and Moff Gideon is the one who's voicing that, and even suggests alternative leadership. But that essentially, they do agree that they need to stop the Mandalorian, so they give supplies to Gideon to help defeat the new Mandalorian search of the Empire. But that still doesn't address the plurality of the spies. I'm thinking the spies, the plural, at least one, if not more members of the various Mandalorian factions that appear in this episode. And we actually get 3 Mandalorian factions. Obviously, the Mandalorian mercenaries and the Night Owls. We also get, of course, the Children's Watch. And they do return to Mandalorian, where they meet survivors of the Purge who are still living on Mandalore. So among any of those groups could be a spy. I don't know, but it's the spies plural. And I have a feeling next episode will be addressing that. But that is one to note. It's the spies plural. And the Mandalorian mission to retake Mandalore and reclaim the Great Forge goes terribly. Okay, some good stuff. They successfully land on the planet. They come across survivors, and they decide to bring up some of them up to the Mandalorian fleet in orbit to get medical attention. That's all good. But the Armor goes with them. She does not go with them. That's kind of suspicious. But then again, if you go back to when they evacuated Navarro, she did fight against the Empire Zero, so what gives? Is it somebody else? I'm pretty sure, I'm going to say it's safe to say it's not Din, it's not Grogu, it's not Paz Vizsla, and it's not bo-katan. Why? Well, obviously it's not going to be our main characters, and it can't be Paz because, yeah, he gave probably one of the most sincere "this is the way." So, as I said, it doesn't go well. They're ambushed by Imperial troopers, and these are not regular stormtroopers. They're wearing Mandalorian Beskar armor. So basically like the Imperial super commandos. So these could be Mandalorians who side with the Empire or just regular recruits of the Empire. But yeah. But essentially they pin them down. Axe actually goes to get help. So what gives there? He doesn't bring help, but maybe he will in the next episode. But again, we won't know. So who's the spy? Is still up in there, or spies plural. So it's very possible there's more than one spy among more than one faction of Mandalorians, because the Empire wants to keep the Mandalorians divided. Because the Empire sees the Mandalorians as a threat for them. But getting back onto track, they eventually do find they will ambush Archie at the Great Forge, and eventually they go through the tunnels and caves, and they find the Imperial base where those divide into two groups. A smaller group of Din and 4 others who are nameless, and they don't make it. Din gets captured, and then Moff, part of his plan, because he thinks the weakness of the Dark Trooper project was lack of him. Literally, that is literally what he thinks. He says that out loud. While Dr. Pershing confirms it was a human pilot that was the weakness, but in Gideon's eyes, he wants to combine Mandalorian, Jedi, Imperial, clones all together to create a super soldier for the Empire, likely modeled off of him, obviously. It seems very much in his ego. But Bo-Katan does not, give up the Darksaber, and she cuts a hole for them to rescue, while Paz holds off those Imperial troopers wearing Beskar armor. Which also, by the way, that confirms that those were the ones who rescued Moff Gideon from the Empire, from the Republic. But the Republic might still think it could be the Mandalorians. But I have a feeling that New Republic officer, he's smarter than that. He's gonna say, that's weird, and he's gonna investigate. Higher ups in the Republic, who knows? But him, yeah, he's gonna be more careful about his investigation. But getting back on track, because I keep on getting off track, is so Paz sacrifices himself to hold off. He sacrifices himself so hard, his gun barrel for his heavy blaster overheats. It stops working, and he defeats the remaining Imperial troopers in hand-to-hand combat. Pretty good. And then the Praetorian Guards show up. I did mention this earlier. That was 3 Praetorian Guards were distinctly mentioned in the opening sequence with the Imperial Shadow Council as reinforcements for Gideon, and they take out Paz easily. He struggles. He puts up a fight, but they take him out. And what that's showing us is a couple things. One, we had Paz just hold off basically entire Imperial platoon, it seems like, and then he's taken out. He's shown to be this tough fighter. He's able to, even if his blasters not working, he can still hold his own in hand-to-hand combat. But these Praetorian Guards are, this was to show us how dangerous they are. This guy who just defeated a bunch of Imperials barely stood a chance. He did give it his best, but he barely stood a chance. And speaking of Praetorian Guards, that was who was protecting Snoke in The Last Jedi. Kind of interesting. And then I believe we also saw them again on Exegol in The Rise of Skywalker. All this is connected. There's probably multiple layers of Imperials infighting. Some who are aware of Palpatine's plan, some who aren't. I have a feeling Hux is aware of what's going on with Palpatine, while Pellion's aware of what's going on with Thrawn, and those two factions only know what's going on because of the Imperial Shadow Council. I'm just saying, there's a lot of probably Imperial infighting that's been revealed in this episode. But that's neither here or there. Actually, it is, because there is a connection, and showing that the foundations for the First Order are still being laid. We gotta see how this all develops, but that's just the plot summary, all the interesting stuff. I even forgot this. Griff Karga has the droid smith rebuild IG-11 as basically a mech for Grogu to pilot. So now he has basically a walker for himself, a tiny little walker modeled off of a droid. But no, that also gives Grogu a yes and no button, so he can now express his acceptance, displeasure, no, and all that kind of stuff in ways that he couldn't do before. And that actually is very important, because we see him playing with it, enjoying it, but when they meet up with those Mandalorian survivors, they get on a ship, land ship, I guess. But anyhow, Paz and Axe are playing a game of Mandalorian chess, and there's a disagreement on how a piece is supposed to move in the game, and it gets into a fight between the two of them. Yeah. But this is also right after Bo-Katan, not right after, like the next day, it's afterwards in the plot, where Bo-Katan laments how the Mandalorians are always fighting each other and never uniting, and is how it's always dividing them. And notice she's lamenting that all the time. But Grogu is the one who steps in and breaks up the fight. Bo-Katan wasn't going to step in. Nobody else didn't even ask Bo-Katan, and says neither party can step in. But essentially the idea is like, this is what we do. But you can tell, like, she wishes she could. But Grogu, the foundling, the youngling, he's the one who steps in, taking the lessons of the Jedi, because I'm pretty sure he uses the Force to get there pretty quickly. But he's the one who steps in and stops the fight. Why? Because he knows that this division, them fighting each other when they should be getting along, is wrong. It's like, no, you guys don't need to fight. He's just a kid, but that's important because unlike all the other Mandalorians, he doesn't have all the baggage of years, centuries, familiar histories of hostility between the various different factions, tribes, clans of Mandalore houses. Like, to him, he just sees Mandalorians like his father fighting, and he's like, why? It doesn't make sense to him, so he stops. He stops the fight. And I would say he, and it's shown, he is in the right to do it. You know, because it connects nicely with how Bo-katan is constantly lamenting Mandalorians fighting each other, but how still Stitch is set in some of the ways that are holding Mandalorians back, she doesn't get involved. But Grogu, he's not held back by that. He sees Mandalorians fighting each other, and he's like, that shouldn't be, and he stops it. It's as simple as that. Of course, there's a lot of other stuff going on. We actually confirm how Bo-Katan lost the Darksaber. She surrenders it to Moff Gideon, hoping he would spare Mandalore. Ends up he doesn't. He lies, and Bo-Katan, basically thinks to herself she was a fool for that. You can tell that's how she's thinking, but it does help explain how I've been saying she's been in depression over everything that's happened to Mandalore. There's even reflection on how she even does actually reflect on how when she was younger, she was part of the problem that kept Mandalorians divided. And I think this is probably the biggest takeaway from the episode. Among Mandalorian society, probably other societies as well, but specific for some Mandalorians, these divisions between various subgroups is pointless. It divides them. It prevents them from actually facing threats like the Empire united. They can't stand up to the Empire together. And the Empire wants Mandalorians divided. They recognize that Mandalore and the Mandalorians are a threat to their power and eventual reconquest of the galaxy. They know that. That's why when Moff Gideon says, Mandalorians, they seem to be reuniting. I need some supplies. Come give me some supplies. They actually do it. Because while they all have probably their own designs on power within the Imperial Remnant, they all recognize the Mandalore as a threat to them. So they'll bicker, but they even among their division, they recognize that this group uniting will threaten their unity, or more likely their chance to seize power, because the Empire, you can tell they don't have any loyalty. Each of the Imperials in the Shadow Council, none of them have uniforms anymore. Pelion looks the one who has the most traditional uniform, but Moff Gideon has his own. They all have special either uniforms or flares to their uniforms, just kind of showing that they're not truly united. They're not a united Imperial faction. And of course, with the Empire, their unity is different than, say, the unity of the Mandalorians or other cultures. For the Empire, it's unity through force and fear. Mandalorians, it's unity through culture and values. That's the difference between them. And I think that difference of why Mandalorians can unite when they do is so threatening to the Empire. Because the Empire knows if the Mandalorians truly united and stopped fighting each other over petty differences, they would be the most dangerous force in the galaxy. We saw that actually in Legends a lot, where Mandalorians, when they fought together, were unstoppable. But anyone who saw a threat in the Mandalorians just had to divide them. And yeah, like literally, in Legends with the Sith purposely divided the Mandalorians in the lead up to the Clone Wars, and got the Jedi and the Sith, a Jedi and the Mandalorians to fight each other. Also to find somebody who they could clone, to create a clone army to take out the Jedi. Yeah, it's all connected with Palpatine's plan. But see how that is, like, that in Legends, the Empire or the Sith did recognize the threat of the Mandalorians, even though in the past, in like the Old Republic, they did somewhat work together. But then again, also, let's look in canon. The Empire kept on trying to find some Mandalorian to lead Mandalore who was loyal to them. But the Mandalorians who didn't support the Empire kept on rising up and taking that guy out. The Saxon clan mainly. So, of course, the Empire probably eventually decided, screw it, we're just going to destroy them. And they did, but they didn't totally. They missed the the Death Watch and the Watch who were on Concordia, and the other Mandalorians who were scattered about the galaxy, those who escaped the planet, even those on the planet who survived. Like Mandalore was already inhospitable before the purge. Probably the Mandalorians who survived on the planet, they probably had some practice already, I'm just saying. But that's kind of what's showing. It's showing the Empire sees their power, whether individually or as a group, being threatened by the unity of the Mandalorians, and are now taking steps to ensure that Mandalorians stay divided. And it also is nicely reflective of how anybody who tries to keep power uses the concept of divide and conquer. Back during the imperial and colonial periods of world history, European colonizers, but other colonizers who didn't have to be Europeans, could have been Americans, Japanese, Chinese. It doesn't matter whatever period in time. People who were looking to conquer used the divide and conquer. Look at the messed up borders in many parts of Africa. That's a legacy of imperial colonialism, where they purposely divided lines and put certain tribes in power in certain areas and other tribes to keep control, so they didn't have to use as much resources. They divided and conquered. But it doesn't matter, in all world history, there's always somebody using division to take control of a certain area. And we do see this in Star Wars. Why do you think Palpatine orchestrated basically what amounted to a civil war among the galaxy in the Rise of the Empire? It was to divide them, and then he could use reuniting the galaxy as an excuse for taking power. You see this time and time again in Star Wars, in real life, where a faction looking to seize power divides the inhabitants of whatever planet, society, sect, doesn't matter, or culture. The people that could be a threat, they work to divide. That's why in Star Wars, the Rebel Alliance actually being an alliance of rebel cells was so dangerous to the Empire. A single cell here or there, they could take out, but there was, we see this in Rebels, we see this in the original trilogy, where these rebels seem to be getting help from other rebels. That's dangerous. Like, the idea of rebels helping each other was seen as dangerous to the Empire because it wasn't them being divided anymore. In some ways, Saul was good to the Empire because he was one rebel faction that couldn't get along with the rest of the rebels. But by taking him out, they inadvertently united his survivors with the rest of the Rebel Alliance. But time and time again, we have seen this in Star Wars, and the Empire is doing this once again to the Mandalorians. And will it succeed? Will it not? I don't know, but I have a suspicion. We're going to find out in the next episode. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, upvote, and share. Also, let me know what did you think of the spies in the comment section down below. And welcome to my spoiler-free review of The Mandalorian Chapter 24, Episode 8 of the 3rd season, and the season finale. And I gotta say, it was an amazing episode. While my predictions didn't turn out the way I was expecting, it still was a very great finale, and actually, in my opinion, tied up the plot threads of both season 1 and 2 and 3 all together in a nice, good, natural endpoint. Because as we know, with some related shows coming out soon, I don't know when we'll get a season 4, if we will even get a season 4. So it makes sense that they would want to end this season at a natural endpoint, an endpoint that feels satisfying. And welcome to my full spoiler review of The Mandalorian Chapter 24, the 8th episode of the 3rd season, entitled The Return. And like I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, this was an excellent season finale, though I will say it didn't feel as climactic as some of the other season finales, but I think it makes sense because with all the spin-off shows, Ahsoka, I think there's a season 2 of the Book of Boba Fett coming, Dave Filoni's movie, that I have feeling they may want to start wrapping up certain plot elements so they can bring all this stuff together in that climatic story for everything they're telling about the Imperial Remnant and potentially tying in with Thrawn there, which makes me want to reread the Thrawn trilogy. But that's just, I think, the reasoning behind why they chose to make this season finale feel more like a natural endpoint than so many other season finales previously. Because good endings always, in my opinion, conclude the story that's telling, but also leaves up avenues for future stories, even if no future stories will be told. And this episode ends at such a natural endpoint. Yes, we don't know, is Mandalore successfully going to rebuild. We don't know anything like that. We don't know with Din and Grogu if they are going to, what's going to happen to them in the future. But where they'll ended the story is natural. It's a good point to end it at, because if we don't get any more, it's still a satisfying ending. But if we do get more, it's a great jumping off point for a new adventure. And okay, I gotta say this about the ending scene. The literally line like between your new adventures. Like I just thought that was a neat little scene though. But yeah, so let's actually talk about the plot and what goes on, so we can talk about the finale. Oh, sorry, we talk about the ending of the episode in a way that makes sense. Let's just put it this way: they retake Mandalore, though it takes a lot. So they do end up sacrificing their capital ship by because Axe has everyone get off the ship and to go help Bo-Katan on the ground, and then he uses the ship to hold off the Imperial fighters before he crashes it into the into Moff Gideon's base. Which, by the way, did he get inspired by Anakin from the Ryloth episode of the Clone Wars where Anakin crashed a Star Destroyer into a Lucrehulk? I wonder. Interesting little connection right there. I don't know if that was an intentional Easter egg or not, but I did like it. But they do defeat Moff Gideon, and what's actually nice is it was actually the ship crashing that defeats Moff Gideon, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, it was not Bo-Katan, it was not Din, it was not Grogu. Yes, those three did play a major role in helping to stop Gideon, but it was Mandalore fighting against him that actually stopped him. Oh, and I should probably mention how Grogu uses the Force once again to save Din, but also Bo-Katan. As the Mandalorians captured Imperial light cruiser crashes into the planet, it takes out Moff Gideon, like I mentioned, and the fireball consumes him. And it's also would consume Din, Bo-Katan, and Grogu as well, if not for Grogu using Force to hold the fire back. And that makes me wonder, did Sabine ever tell Bo-Katan what happened with Canyon and that's how he died? I wonder if Bo-Katan was aware of that. It's just a neat little connection I thought of. But what this really does show, and all the other uses of the Force by Grogu in this episode, is he is much stronger in the Force than he was. He's connected with it once again. He uses it to avoid the Praetorian Guard and also to give Din an advantage while fighting the Praetorian Guard. And then now here he is using it to save the people he cares about. His father, I'm going to say Bo-Katan kind of seems like an aunt for him right now. But yeah, I just really loved how they did that and showed that. And really does connect nicely with Grogu growing in the Force. Like I say, Grogu fighting the Praetorian Guards was amazing. Yeah, sure, he needed Din to actually stop them, but he also helped Din survive against them. Because, like I mentioned in the last episode, that Paz Vizsla, his death by the hands of the Praetorian Guard, were to show how dangerous they are. And Din and Grogu together were able to defeat them. Din using his skills as a Mandalorian, and Grogu using the Force to make the Praetorian Guards off balance, off center, to allow Din to have the opportunity to take them out. Oh, and also speaking of, Din does almost escape by himself, but he gets pinned by one of the Imperial Super Commanders. I'm going to be calling those Imperials in Beskar armor Imperial Super Commanders, just like they won't call that in Star Wars Rebels, because it makes sense. But Din gets pinned, and if not for Grogu, Din would not have been unpinned from them, which is, it actually does make a lot of sense. But yeah, they do successfully stop them, basically win. But the Darksaber is destroyed in this, which I think is a very good thing for Mandalore. Now, it kind of is a little bit glossed over, but I think it's very important because the Darksaber, in many ways, was that symbol of Mandalorian's past, but the conflict of Mandalorians, how they're always driving each other apart, fighting each other, all for, all to control the Darksaber, to control the throne, or whatnot. They're always fighting each other. And in some ways, while the Darksaber is a symbol of power in Mandalorian society, it's also a symbol of what holds Mandalore back. And I think its destruction will allow Mandalore to recover. And one thing that the survivors on Mandalore from the Night of Thousand Tears and the Empire's Purge is doing is they're actually recultivating the native plants of Mandalore. In their survival, they found some of them starting to grow naturally, and then in safe areas, they started cultivating them for food. But this is showing two things, I think. One, the planet itself is recovering. The Mandalorian society was war-torn among the culture, but was also tearing the planet apart. And the planet is finally starting to recover. I think it's going to be more than just the planet recovering, but it's the people recovering as well. Bo-Katan remarks that she had not seen the native plants outside of the garden, i.e. in areas where they were not let to be roam wild, roam free, even though they're plants. But I think the return of plant life to Mandalore is showing Mandalore recovering, not just the people, but the planet itself. Because like I mentioned earlier, the Darksaber was destroyed by Moff Gideon in his fight with Bo-Katan. That there is breaking the power of the Darksaber. The power, the symbol of the Darksaber, in many ways represented the conflict at the root of Mandalorian society. Mandalorians fighting each other over who is Mandalorian, who deserves to be Mandalorian, fighting for power, fighting for control. It represented and held all the worst aspects of Mandalorian society. Even the abstentionary good Mandalorians were still attracted to the Darksaber and saw it as their way of holding power and the way of showing other Mandalorians that they deserved and could have the power of ruling Mandalore. Which is interesting because it was destroyed after Bo-Katan sees that the planet is recovering. And I think to recover, the planet needs to regain its life, but the Mandalorians need to stop fighting each other, and I think they have achieved. But it's the power of the Darksaber, I think, being physically broken, no longer being able to be won in combat or passed down. If anything, it's just going to get a place in the museum where they teach future generations of Mandalorians about how they used to fight each other. I don't know for sure, but that's just wild speculation there. But I think Mandalore can now move beyond. They don't need to get rid of the warrior culture, but they can start moving beyond the stupid rules that have held them back, the stupid traditions that have kept feuds alive between clans and tribes. That's what has always held Mandalorian back, their internal divisions and infighting because of those divisions. Other societies are able to function despite divisions. No, they are accepting of tolerant. And I think Mandalorians can be that, but essentially, I think generations of Mandalorians fighting over the Darksaber has created a lot of bad blood. But with the Darksaber now destroyed, hopefully they can put all that behind them. And speaking of putting the past behind them, the Mandalorians, they are starting to rebuild the planet and the society now that Moff Gideon has been defeated. They restart the Great Forge. There's a big ceremony in the Beskar Mines in the Living Waters where Paz the Sun is actually says the creed. But if I remember correctly from when we saw it earlier, this time there was nothing about keeping the helmet on. I could be wrong, but I don't remember anything about the helmet being mentioned at all this time. Which is kind of interesting. Maybe the children of the watch, now that they are back on Mando, they don't, like, maybe the rules have changed. Well, you can take your helmet off, but only on Mando. I could see them doing something like that. I really could. I'm still a little bit, the characterization of the armor is still a bit fuzzy for me, not that clear cut. All the other characters seem okay, but her characterization just seems a bit more unclear, unfocused, if you will. But maybe that's supposed to be the point, reflecting the complexities of real people and how sometimes there can be a little bit of a dissonance between what they say, what they do, and all that. I don't know. But another thing is, Din also formally adopts Grogu. Now, we, I think, all assumed that ahead of time, but let's be real. In many ways, before, in the Mandalorian society, he was only, Grogu was only his ward. He was only essentially the foster parent, the guardian of Grogu, not the legal guardian, the legal father, if you will. But that's formally done. That's how I come into it. There's a difference between practice and legality, and this was just making practice set up with reality. But it also means that Din will now start training Grogu in the ways of Mandalorian, in the Mandalore. I think that is very good there, because it's showing that they are truly a family. Yes, basically ever since they've met, they've been father and son, but now in the eyes of Mandalorian law, I guess, they are legally father and son, recognized in the songs of their ancestors, and whatever the thing with Mandalore. Like, it's official, not. Yeah, we all know, but it hasn't been written down, kind of deal. That's one way of looking at it. I've seen other people interpret it many different ways, but personally, that's how I chose to interpret it. Because another major aspect of the ending is Grogu essentially gets Din's family name, which apparently is Din. So Jaren is his his given name. I don't know, but it makes me wonder. Because that doesn't seem to work with what we've seen with Bo-Katan Kryze, because her sister's name was Satine Kryze, and then their nephew was Kogi Kryze. Kryze was the family name, or was it? Could Mandalorian names have three parts: the family name, the given name, and then maybe the clan name? I'm just saying, because Clan Kryze. Um, I'm just speculating. Or could different Mandalorian clans organize their names slightly differently? I don't know. But it's something very interesting to know. So Grogu's now Din Grogu, which I gotta say, Grogu Jaren does sound kind of weird, so Din Grogu makes more sense. But it does make me wonder, how do Mandalorian names, in basic, not in the Mandalorian language, but in basic, actually work? Like, is it some kind of thing like, okay, where do you put your family name, where do you put your given name, where do you put your clan name? Like, I could see different clans and different tribes organizing that slightly differently, just like how in human society, some cultures put the family name first and some cultures put the given name first. And so there's many different ways of doing that. So it would be kind of nice to see that thing that also occurs in Mandalorian society, given how they are. There's many different groups of Mandalorians. Makes sense that Mandalorian naming traditions could be different from clan to clan and tribe to tribe. Just something to take a note of. And of course, another thing I would like to discuss is that Din goes to that base planet that the New Republic is on and basically talks with them about defeating Moff Gideon, because apparently they were also looking for him as well. Though I suspect that was the only New Republic force that was actually doing anything. But one thing Din does say that they would have gotten Moff Gideon eventually. He only got to them first, but he also offers to basically work as basically a bounty hunter for the New Republic unofficially. Like, he knows that the New Republic in the Outer Rim is stretched thin and is wrapped up with bureaucracy. So essentially, he's telling the commander, the captain, I forget his name. Though we get to see in the background, Dave Filoni's cameo again. But anyhow, the person who's leading the New Republic forces out there, you can tell he probably, right, he says he has to think about it. Din and him already know what the decision is, but they probably do have to keep things a little bit under the radar, if you will, because the New Republic bureaucracy. The idea, I think, is that he's basically said, hey, if there's something you need done and you can't get it because of bureaucracy, call me up and I'll just do it off the record for you guys. That's essentially the impression I get. And all he asks, because they have an IG head though, which means they have an IG memory circuit. Takes it to the droidsmith on Navarro, and IG-11 is rebuilt to be the new Marshal of Navarro, which I think is a great way of doing it. And that actually makes me think this too. There's a difference between the memory circuit and the memory bank. The reason why I'm saying that is because if the memory banks were gone, I don't think IG-11 could have ever returned. But what I think the memory circuit is what makes the memory banks and the processor communicate with each other. And that's what I'm thinking is going on though. So it'd be kind of like if there's no good example in a human, but let's say somebody like the part of the brain that allows them to tell the rest of their body what to do is broken, and we could it's damaged, that nerve is damaged, and we could somehow replace it. That's, I think, more of what a memory circuit is. That's not quite a good example. I really don't have a great example at all, but That's kind of what I feel like they're trying to say about that. And then also, Din and Grogu get a deed to a cabin on Navarre, so that way they have a place to rest between adventures, between Din training Grogu and all that, which is nice. But I kind of wish at the very end when they zoomed up, or zoomed in actually, they zoomed in on Grogu. Makes sense. Oh, and by the way, when they were in the mines of Mandalorian by the Living Waters, Grogu made a connection with the Mrs. Soul. I guarantee you, Grogu, when he grows up, is going to be the new leader of Mandalore. I just got that suspicion there. I just do. But circling back to the ending, zooms in on Grogu, but what I really wish in the background, Din took his helmet off. I really wish they had done that, because this season, I think, is the only season where Din never takes off his helmet. I feel like that would have been a perfect place for him to do it. Just him and his son, because I feel like the children to watch are at least an exception among family. That's just what I'm saying. Really wish they explored that a little bit more, and that would also show that he's comfortable. I know. I do feel like some of the messaging about the children in the watch was a bit muddled this season. I'm again wondering if that was some of the stuff that was changed around with COVID and shooting the book of Boba Fett and how they mushed some things together. It does make me wonder if some of that messed up some of this how they want you to tell the stories. I really don't know, but that's just what I feel like might have happened, which does kind of hurt the episode. Not too much. I just wish that they did that at the very end. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. So now that we've taken a look at each of the episodes, I think I can better articulate what I thought the season was missing. And I think, like I was kind of trying to get at before, it's that disconnect between the season-wide story and the individual character stories that were being told. I felt like that's where that disconnect was. That doesn't necessarily mean that they did a bad job. In fact, each individual episode by itself is pretty solid, but taken all together, the overarching story feels lackluster, feels a bit lacking. They did a great job telling each individual segment of the story, whether it be the story of the Mandalorian people or the Din story, Grogu story, bo-katan story. They were each individual story they did good, but bringing them all together, something like was not jiving. It's like the connective tissue was not quite there. Like bo-katan was passive in her story the entire time, which is not necessarily a bad thing, and she finally does make a actual choice impacting the plot, not surrendering again to Gideon. That's when she made that choice there. Granted, she didn't make the choice about destroying the Darksaber, but that was Gideon destroying it in the fight. But that's not the point. She finally, in the last episode, actually made a choice that advanced the story rather than reacting. But still, like Din, like his character story was almost non-existent. Sure, what we got was good, but it felt like it was more just confirming what we knew about his character. I suspect that because of the Last of Us, they couldn't get Pedro Pascal as much for filming, so that's why I don't think why Din removed his helmet, and I think why I think Din's story was a bit lacking because of that that more busy schedule for Pedro Pascal. That's just my theory there. But I think if we kind of take a look at those individual pieces, they did a decent enough job with what they were telling, but bringing all together, connecting each story seems to each other to tell one complete story. That is where season 3 of The Mandalorian is lacking. But that still didn't turn me off from the show. No, they did a great job, phenomenal job. It's just that connective tissue was missing. So I think when it comes to season 4, which hasn't been announced yet, but come on, there's gonna be a season 4. There's no way there's not going to be one. I have a feeling it's gonna be telling a story more like season 2, which I hope means that they're going to do a better job at Din and Grogu's story, because I think that there is what we really wanted to see and what I do hope we see in season 4, because that's what was really lacking in season 3. But those are just my thoughts on season 3 of The Mandalorian. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, upvote, and share the video if you haven't done so already. And as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. This is the way.